A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. Silent Shadows. The mist clung to the ancient trees like ghosts, and Seraphina pulled her thin cloak tighter, a useless gesture against the biting cold that had already sunk deep into her bones. Every breath she took was a sharp, painful gasp, a constant reminder of the fragile thread that separated her from the suffocating despair that was her life. Her worn boots, the soles thin from years of hardship, did little to protect her from the frozen ground as she wandered the woods at the edge of the pack's territory. This was her cage, a beautiful, sprawling prison where even the light seemed reluctant to linger. She was an exile in her own bloodline, a shadow fading in the periphery. The pack's judgment followed her everywhere, as sharp and cold as the winter wind. Sometimes, when the loneliness became a physical ache, she would press her calloused hands against the rough bark of a pine, seeking solace in its unyielding presence. It was in these moments that the memories would rush in, sharp enough to steal her breath. She could almost feel her mother's warm embrace, smell the scent of herbs and home that always clung to her. She remembered the stories, whispered under starlit skies, of their ancestors, the moonlit singers, a powerful line of healers whose voices could soothe the cruelest of hearts and mend the most fractured souls. Her voice had once been a promise, a beacon of hope for the pack. Then the fever came, a roaring fire that had swept through her as a child, stealing her gift and leaving only a haunting silence in its wake. The irony was a constant bitter taste in her mouth. She was a songweaver who couldn't sing, a healer who couldn't heal with the one gift that defined her bloodline. Her hut, a fragile sanctuary of shadow and frost, stood as a testament to her failure. The pack's harsh laws demanded she serve them in silence, shunned by the very people who had once called her family. Her duty was both penance and survival. She was the caretaker of the pack's unwanted, the orphaned infants and broken souls they discarded at the edge of their consciousness. Those children were the only reason she hadn't surrendered to the void long ago. Their survival depended on her, and so she endured, but it was a hollow existence. Every glance cast in her direction carried the weight of exile, the burden of disappointment heavy as a stone in her gut. The loss of her voice was more than a trauma. It was a fracturing of her identity, a constant reminder of everything she was meant to be and everything she was not. But today, the hollow ache in her chest was sharpened by a fresh dread. The summons had arrived this morning. A grim-faced beta had dropped the official scroll on her doorstep without a word, his contempt a palpable force. Now it sat on her small, rickety table, an omen of the humiliation to come. The Great Moon Banquet. Her presence was mandatory. It wasn't an invitation. It was a sentence. She knew why they wanted her there. It was a cruel spectacle, a chance to parade their broken songweaver before the entire clan, a living symbol of weakness in a pack that valued strength above all else. And he would be there, watching. King Kieran, the alpha of alphas. She had only ever seen him from a distance. A tall, imposing figure whose stormy silver eyes seemed to carry the weight of his own dark history. He was a king haunted by the burdens of his ancestors, and it was his law, his rule, that kept her chained to this life of silent servitude. As the clouds gathered, darkening the horizon like a mourning veil, a familiar shiver of fear traced its way down her spine. But as she drew her cloak tighter, another feeling rose to meet it. An ember of defiance, hot and fierce, that had smoldered beneath the ashes of her despair for years. They had taken her voice, her status, her future, but they couldn't take everything. Her hands trembled as she thought of the faded scrolls her mother had left her, hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the hut. They were covered in ancient glyphs, a testament to a lineage whispered of in forbidden lore. The magic of her ancestors was not dead. She could feel it sometimes, a dormant storm humming beneath her skin, potent as buried fire, waiting for a summons of its own. A distant howl cut through the stillness, the sound echoing through the valley. The pack was stirring. The gears of fate were turning. The summons for the banquet felt less like an invitation and more like a blade poised to strike. Destiny was coming for her, its threads weaving around her like a spider's web. Intricate and inescapable, The ache in her chest swelled with the unspoken songs of her ancestors, their rhythms set to the frantic beat of her own heart. Her solitary vigil was nearing its end. Tonight, the moon would call, the pack would gather, and her silent melody would finally face their brutal light. The song had been silenced, but as dawn bore witness to her silent vow, she knew it was not lost forever. Chapter 2. Broken Melodies. The great hall was a cavern of flickering torchlight and suffocating heat. Long shadows danced upon the cold stone walls, twisting the faces of the pack members into grotesque masks that mirrored the turmoil churning in Serafina's gut. The moment she stepped through the towering gates, she felt the weight of every gaze in the room land on her like a physical blow. The air, thick with the scent of roasted boar, spiced ale, and damp fur, was heavy with a hunger that had nothing to do with the feast laid out on the long tables. They were hungry for her humiliation. She kept her eyes down, her threadbare cloak pulled tight as if it could shield her from the sharp sting of their scorn. Whispers followed her like a plague, slithering through the boisterous noise of the banquet. There she is. The broken Omega. Can you believe the Alpha is making her perform? Each word was an icy blade slicing at the worn shards of her courage. Her mind raced, a chaotic assault of memories of better days, of a time when her voice had soared like a silver phoenix, weaving ancient melodies that could soothe the darkest of hearts. The cruel irony of her silence was a physical ache in her chest, born to heal with song, yet now condemned to mute despair. She could see the pack's hierarchy on full display. Proud alphas in their frost-lined furs, their lethal betas circling with watchful eyes, and the other omegas, shrinking beneath the weight of expectations she knew all too well. Her gaze found Ronan near the hearth, her forsaken mate. He was laughing with a group of warriors, but his eyes were locked on her, a cruel smirk twisting his lips. He lifted his tankard in a mocking toast. The gesture was meant to break her, a public reminder of his rejection after the fever had stolen her gift. For a moment, her resolve wavered. Everything within her rebelled, screaming at her to turn and flee back to the safety of her hut. But then she thought of the orphaned pups she cared for, their wide, innocent eyes trusting her completely. She had promised to protect them, and that promise was a chain of duty binding her heart to this pack's cruel fate. Then, a hush fell over the hall. The boisterous conversations died, the laughter cut short. A palpable wave of energy washed through the room, a force that commanded reverence and fear. King Kieran had entered. He moved with the silence of winter's wrath, a storm contained in human form. His presence was a gale that bent the very air around him. Serafina risked a glance from beneath her lashes. He was even more formidable up close. Dressed in dark, severe furs that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, his silver eyes swept over the gathered pack, missing nothing. When his gaze finally landed on her, it lingered for a heartbeat too long, sharp and assessing, before moving on as if she were nothing. The dismissal stung more than Ronan's open mockery. The elders' voices rose, commanding the ceremony to begin. Serafina felt a rough hand on her back, propelling her forward. Each step on the worn wooden floor groaned in protest, a defiant pulse against the sea of judgment. The audience's hunger for her failure was a living thing, pressing in on her from all sides. She reached the small, raised platform at the center of the hall. It felt less like a stage and more like a block for an execution. Her trembling fingers found the rough, carved wood of the music stand, clinging to it like a lifeline. She took a breath, the air tasting of smoke and malice, and it felt as though she was breathing in the weight of centuries of expectation. Then, with a voice that was fragile but unwavering, she let it go. A single note. It hung in the air, tenuous as frost on dark water. It was a broken sound, a whisper of the power that had once flowed through her. The hall, which had been buzzing with anticipation, fell into a haunting silence, every ear strained to grasp the ethereal, shattered melody. But beneath the fragile sound lay a current of ancient power. The magic of the moonblood, dormant for so long, surged through the note, invisible but potent. It wasn't a song of healing. It was a song of defiance, of survival, of a spirit that refused to be extinguished. Across the hall, King Kieran's head snapped up. His mask of cold indifference shattered, and his silver eyes locked onto hers, blazing with a fire she had not dared to imagine. He leaned forward, his entire body tensed, as if he were the only one in the room who could hear the true magic woven into her broken song. It stirred something deep within his alpha soul, kindling embers that had long been thought extinguished. In that moment, as their gazes held, the frozen divide between them seemed to soften. The truth of an ancient bond, a forgotten legend, whispered through the gathering. Ronan's cruel smirk had vanished, replaced by a stunned, slack-jawed disbelief. The whispers in the crowd swelled again, but this time they were a chorus of awe and confusion. Seraphina's shattered song had breathed life into a power they had all forgotten. It carried not shame, but the promise of reclamation. The night held its breath, the strands of destiny intertwining the broken songbird and the reluctant king. This banquet, meant to be her final humiliation, had become the opening chapter of a story carved in ice and song. As the final fragile note quivered and faded into the silence, a single collective breath was released by the pack. The fire of their entwined souls had been lit, and this winter's tale was destined to echo through the ages. Tonight, the song had been heard. Tomorrow, its echo would shake the foundations of their world. Chapter 3: Threads of Fate. In the quiet aftermath of the great banquet, Seraphina found herself a prisoner in a gilded cage. She had been moved from her humble hut to a sprawling chamber within the Blackwood stronghold, a world of carved stone, rich tapestries, and suffocating silence. The scent of her own sorrow, once a familiar companion, was now replaced by the sterile smell of polish and power. She was a reluctant guest, and the entire fortress seemed to be holding its breath, watching the delicate, dangerous dance unfold between the broken Omega and their formidable king. The days that followed were thick with a tension she could taste. Every footstep in the vast, echoing halls seemed to murmur secrets of ancient prophecies and a music older than memory. She saw King Kieran only in passing, a dark, imposing figure pacing the great chamber, the weight of responsibility etched into his stern features. She could sense the fracture beneath his armor, the profound loneliness that his icy mask failed to hide in moments when he thought no one was watching. He was tormented by the shadows of his lineage, bearing the burden of a curse cast long ago, one born of blood spilled amidst betrayal and despair. After a week of suffocating solitude, a soft knock came at her door. An elderly she-wolf with eyes as kind as they were, Wise introduced herself as Mother Aisling. "The king has requested I begin your training," the elder said, her voice a soft, soothing chant. "Training for what?" Seraphina asked, her voice raspy from disuse. "I have nothing left to offer." "Oh, child." Mother Aisling smiled gently. "Your song is not gone. It is merely slumbering, blocked by a pain too great to bear. Your bloodline is ancient and powerful. You are a moonblood, the last of the true song weavers." The word, moonblood, ignited a spark within her, a hope tangled with a lifetime of fear. Mother Aisling led her to a hidden library, its shelves heavy with weathered tomes and faded scrolls. For weeks they worked. The elder's voice wove tales of ancestral glories, of a time when the song weavers could command the lingering magic of the moon itself. She spoke of the cataclysm that had led to the near annihilation of their line, a tragedy orchestrated by a rival pack hungry for their power. With every lesson, Seraphina's spirit stirred. Mother Aisling encouraged her to try, to let out even the smallest sound. The first time, her voice cracked, a painful, broken thing that brought hot tears of shame to her eyes. "Do not despair," the elder soothed, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "The melody rises from the soul, not the throat. Your anguish is part of your song now. Let it be your strength." And so, with every lesson, the melodies began to rise through her broken voice, carrying both pain and a startling potent magic. In the quiet hours when the moon was high, she would sing softly into the void, and she could feel the forbidden melodies winding through the very stones of the fortress, awakening echoes that whispered of destiny and redemption. Her path began to cross more frequently with the king's. He would appear in the library, a silent observer in the shadows, his expression a storm of conflicting emotions. One evening, she found him staring at a portrait of a stern-faced wolf, his father. "He destroyed so much," Kieran said, his voice a low rumble. He didn't turn to look at her, yet she knew he spoke to her. He believed the moon bloodline was a threat to his power. He led the slaughter that silenced your people. Seraphina's heart clenched. And you carry his guilt. He finally turned, and in the firelight, his silver eyes were filled with a regret so profound it stole her breath. It is the curse of my lineage, a debt of blood that can never be repaid. That night, a fragile truce formed between them. The dance of resistance and yearning matured, shadowed by the weight of duty and the ghosts of their shared bloody past. Their stolen moments became more frequent. A shared glance across a crowded council meeting, his fingers brushing hers as he passed her a book. Each fleeting touch was a spark igniting embers of trust that defied the creeping cold of their reality. News from the borders grew more troubling. Enemies, lurking in the frigid darkness, had heard whispers of the last Songweaver. The ever-present threat of discovery loomed, and the pack's elders debated the risks of sheltering her in heated secret meetings. One evening, as a silver mist veiled the sky, Kieran found her on a stone balcony overlooking the snow-covered forest. The drums of winter beat a relentless rhythm, a harbinger of the challenges to come. "They are coming for you," he said, his voice a hushed murmur against the wind. "Rival clans who wish to either control your power or extinguish it forever. Then we will fight," she replied, her own voice finding a strength she didn't know it possessed. "I will not let them harm you," he vowed, stepping closer. The space between them pulsed with unspoken words. "The curse that stains my bloodline. It is a chain of guilt and regret, binding my family to darkness. But when I hear your song, I feel hope." His confession was a raw thread, unraveling the tapestry of his stoic facade. Seraphina listened, her heart aching with a fierce, protective empathy. She understood that their fates were bound not just by an ancient prophecy, but by the haunting refrain of a song centuries old. With trembling hands, she reached for him, her fingers finding his in the cold night air. His skin was warm, his grip firm as their fingers entwined. It was not a touch of passion, but a silent vow amidst the shadows, a promise to face the darkness together. In that fragile balance, two fractured souls began the journey of seeking wholeness, their shared path a single thread in a tapestry, yet unfinished. Chapter 4. Embered Hearts. The chill of winter still clung to the stone corridors of the fortress, but within its guarded walls, a fragile warmth had begun to kindle. Seraphina's world was no longer confined to the shadows of her exile. It had expanded to include ancient libraries filled with whispered lore and training chambers where the secrets of her bloodline were slowly being unveiled. Each day was a battle, but for the first time, it was a battle she felt she might actually win. Her lessons with Mother Aisling were the anchor of her new life. They spent hours in the dusty sanctum of the library, the air thick with the scent of aged parchment and drying herbs. Today, Seraphina's frustration was a bitter taste in her mouth. She stood before a music stand, her voice cracking on a single vital note in a song of shielding. "I can't do it," she said, her voice trembling with unshed tears. "The power is there. I can feel it. But my voice, it's still broken." "Your voice is not broken, child. It is healing," Mother Aisling corrected, her tone gentle but firm. Her weathered fingers traced a delicate, spiraling rune on an old scroll. "Each of these notes is a thread in the fabric of our legacy. The magic of the Moonbloods does not demand perfection. It demands truth. You are pouring your pain, your years of silence into the song. That is what makes it strong." Seraphina closed her eyes, focusing on the elder's words. She thought of the orphans she'd left behind, of the pack that had scorned her, of the king who watched her with haunted eyes. She channeled all of it, the sorrow, the defiance, the fragile, terrifying hope, and let the note out once more. This time it soared, pure and clear, a silver thread of sound that seemed to make the very air in the room shimmer. A wave of warmth washed over her, and she felt the dormant power in her veins pulse with recognition. From the shadows near the doorway, King Kieran watched, his expression a storm of conflicting emotions. He had taken to observing her lessons, a silent, brooding presence that made her skin tingle with awareness. He said nothing, but she could feel his gaze on her, a mixture of awe and a deep, possessive longing that he tried, and failed, to conceal. The fragile peace of their studies was shattered later that day by an urgent council meeting. The air in the great chamber was thick with tension. Kieran sat at the head of the table, every inch the formidable king, but Seraphina could now see the exhaustion that clung to him like a shroud. "They're testing our borders," a grim-faced Beta reported, pointing to a map of their territory. "A raiding party from the Crimson Fang clan was spotted near the northern pass. They were driven back, but they'll return. The whispers are spreading, Alpha. They know we are sheltering the last Songweaver." An old elder slammed his fist on the table. "She is a beacon, and she is a target. Harboring her puts us all at risk. Her song is also our greatest defense." Kieran's voice cut through the room, sharp and cold as steel. "We will not hand her over. We will fortify the pass. Seraphina will aid in weaving protective wards into the very stones of this fortress." He looked directly at her then, and his command was also a plea, a silent acknowledgement of the burden he was placing upon her. It was a declaration to his pack. She was one of them now. She was his. Later that evening, Seraphina found him alone in the ancient grove of oaks that flanked the fortress. The crescent moon cast a pale silver glow over the snow. He stood with his back to her, staring into the darkness, the weight of his legacy pressing down on him. "The curse is more than blood and bone," he confessed without turning, his voice low and heavy. "It is a chain forged by my father's guilt, by his sins. It binds my lineage to darkness, and I can feel it clawing at me every day." Her heart ached for the burden he bore. His ancestors had nearly annihilated her people, yet here he stood, tormented by a legacy he had not chosen. She moved to his side, the silence between them conveying more than battle cries ever could. "You are not your father, Kieran," she whispered. He finally looked at her, and the vulnerability in his gaze was a blade to her heart. "Am I not? I am an alpha who brought you here against your will, who keeps you as a weapon to protect my pack. You keep me here because you know I am safest by your side," she corrected, her own bravery surprising her. "And I stay because for the first time, I feel I have a purpose beyond just surviving." Her fingers, acting of their own accord, reached for his in silent support. The moment her skin brushed his, a jolt of electricity shot through her veins. A raw, awakening power that had nothing to do with her songs. It was the hum of the bond between them, a fragile thread that threatened to unravel the delicate tapestry of duty and fear they had woven around themselves. He didn't pull away. Instead, his hand turned, his fingers lacing with hers. "I am a monster, Seraphina. My blood is tainted with the murder of your kin. And my blood holds the power to heal," she countered, her grip tightening. "Perhaps that is our purpose, to heal each other." The first tentative kiss came then, on a night when the aurora danced in shimmering veils of green and violet across the sky. He lowered his head, his silver eyes searching hers, and she rose on her toes to meet him. Their lips met with the desperate hunger of two souls who had wandered for too long in darkness. It was more than a kiss. It was a cataclysm. The moment they touched, Seraphina felt the song surge within her, a bold crescendo that harmonized with the frantic beat of Kieran's heart. Magic flowed between them, raw and untamed, binding them with threads stronger than steel, more enduring than stone. It was a claiming of souls, a symphony of redemption played out under the watchful eternal gaze of the moon. Their story, fragile as the first thaw, was finally unfolding. Their embered hearts a beacon against the encroaching darkness that threatened to swallow them whole. Chapter 5. Shadows of the Past. Winter's relentless breath howled over the barren lands, a vengeful spirit shrouded in ice and sorrow. Within the fortress walls, the fragile peace trembled on the edge of ruin. The whispered truth of the pack's history had settled like a poison in the air. The horrific legacy of bloodshed was not a recent failure, but a festering curse left by Kieran's own father, the king who had wielded the blade that nearly extinguished the mighty Moonblood clan. The weight of those sins he did not commit but could not escape, was a heavy shroud on King Kieran's shoulders. Seraphina watched him in the tense council meetings, saw the guilt that marred every command he issued. For the firstborn son and heir to the greatest wolf empire, the burden was clawing at the edges of his sanity, Factions had formed in the wake of the revelation. Some whispered of the folly of harboring the last Moonblood, fearing her presence would only invite more darkness. Others saw in her the glimmer of a long-lost legacy, a chance for redemption. But the shadows were stretching far beyond their walls. Hiding in the skeletal forest, rival clans and ancient enemies waited, their eyes burning with covetous desire. Seraphina, the fragile flame of hope, was a prize that could tip the entire balance of power in the region. The night of reckoning descended without warning, a tempest of frost and blood. A warning horn blared from the southern watchtower, a sound that was cut short by a pained scream. The ancient walls shook as the first wave of foes surged from the darkness, their claws bared and teeth gnashing. The air thickened instantly with the acrid scent of smoke and the bitter tang of spilt blood. Chaos erupted in the courtyard. In the midst of it, Seraphina emerged not as a frightened Omega, but as a beacon. Her voice rose, weaving spells of protection and defiance amid the howls and clash of steel. Each note of her song summoned shimmering wards of spectral light, shields forged in melody that deflected claws and blades aimed at her packmates. But the enemy numbers were overwhelming. For every foe that fell, 2 more seemed to take its place. The main gates, a bastion of their defense, began to splinter under the assault of a massive battering ram. As the battle reached its most desperate hour, Seraphina saw him, a trusted lord of the council, one who had argued passionately for her protection, slide the final iron bolt from the gate with a serpent's smile, unleashing a fresh tide of death among their own. Betrayal sliced through the pack's morale more effectively than any blade. Bonds shattered, trust fractured, and the defensive line was sundered in the tempest. It was then, as his people were being cut down and all hope seemed lost, that King Kirin let out a roar of pure, untamed fury. He stood at the precipice of defeat, his human form no match for the overwhelming force. In that moment of dire need, something primal and ancient awakened within him. The air around him shimmered, crackling with an otherworldly energy that made Seraphina's own magic sing in response. His body began to shift and blur, bones cracking and reforming with sickening speed, muscles expanding with supernatural force. With a surge of raw, mystical energy that sent shockwaves across the battlefield, he transformed. Where the man had stood, a magnificent white wolf of impossible size now rose. He was larger than any creature Seraphina had ever imagined, towering over friend and foe alike, his massive frame rippling with barely contained power. His fur blazed like fresh snow touched by moonlight, and his golden eyes burned with the fury of ages. Seraphina's breath caught in her throat. She had known he was a shifter, but this was something more. This was a god of winter and war made flesh. Her heart hammered as she witnessed the true, terrible power of his bloodline. With a roar that shook the very foundations of the fortress, the great white wolf launched into battle. He tore through the enemy ranks like a force of nature unleashed, a whirlwind of white fur and righteous fury. Enemies scattered before his terrible beauty, their attacks useless against his ancient power. Hope, which had been nearly extinguished, rekindled in the hearts of his warriors as they rallied behind their true alpha. But even this magnificent power could not undo the traitor's work. The enemy was too numerous, their position too deeply entrenched within the fortress walls. Despite his awesome power, Kirin faced a torment that no blade could pierce. He could see the battle was lost. To save the greater whole, he would have to make an agonizing sacrifice. With a final, devastating sweep that cleared the area around him, the great wolf shimmered, shifting back into his human form. He was breathing heavily, his body still radiating a visible aura of power, but his eyes were filled with an anguish that broke Seraphina's heart. He found her across the courtyard, his gaze locking with hers. "Seraphina," his voice boomed, imbued with the raw power of an alpha's command. "You must leave. They came for you. If you are gone, the pack has a chance to survive." "No," she cried, starting towards him. "I won't leave you." "This is not a request," he roared, the command forcing her to stumble back, her body instinctively trying to obey. "It is my order. Go, now." Her eyes, filled with tears of defiance and betrayal, burned with the ache of a heart twice broken, first by the traitor, and now by the cold hand of her king. Her guards grabbed her arms, pulling her towards a hidden postern gate as she fought against them. Her last sight was of Kieran, standing alone against the tide. The memory of the magnificent white wolf seared forever into her soul. He had shown her his true self, only to cast her away. And as she was swallowed by the relentless storm of the frozen wilderness, she didn't know which betrayal cut deeper. Chapter 6. Flames of Reckoning. The moon hung low and heavy over the Blackwood Mountains, its light cascading like a silver shroud over the frozen earth. A foreboding stillness had settled over the land, the kind of charged silence that precedes a storm. It was the night of the final reckoning. From the darkness of the skeletal forest, the howls of the Crimson Fang clan pierced the air like banshees heralding doom. Inside the fortress, King Kieran stood before his assembled warriors, their faces etched with a grim mixture of determination and dread. Just as the first cry of battle echoed from beyond the walls, the great gates of the stronghold groaned open. A lone figure stood silhouetted against the swirling snow, her cloak whipping in the wind. It was Seraphina. She had returned not as a shivering exile, but as a specter of defiance, her eyes blazing with a power that was entirely her own. Kieran pushed through his stunned warriors, his face a mask of disbelief and raw fury. "What are you doing here?" he growled, his voice a low thunder that vibrated through the stone floor. "I exiled you to save you. You exiled me to save the pack," she countered, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the rising tension. She stepped into the torchlight, and for the first time, he saw not the broken Omega, but a queen. "But I am part of this pack. I will not hide in the shadows while my family fights and dies for me." Before he could argue, the enemy's war horn blared, a guttural sound that signaled the charge. The raging tide of foes spilled into the courtyard. Kieran's hand found hers, his grip like iron. "Stay by my side," he commanded. And this time, it was not an alpha's order, but a mate's desperate plea. The battle erupted. Claws met steel, magic clashed with shadow, and the air crackled with raw, primal energy. Seraphina stood on the battlements, Kieran a blur of deadly motion on the field below. His great white wolf formed a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. She closed her eyes, drew in a breath, and let her voice rise. It was no longer a broken melody, but a clarion call resonating with untamed power. Her song was a physical force, weaving barriers of shimmering light that deflected claws and blades, protecting the warriors she loved. Her melodies danced through the chaos, mending spirits, bolstering courage, and unraveling the dark curses woven by generations of hatred. Each note was a leap into the past, and a pledge for the future. The tide of the battle began to turn. The pack's warriors, rallied by the crescendo of her voice, fought with renewed ferocity. The enemy's advance faltered, their ferocity met with a mystical power they could not comprehend. Hope, which had been a fragile ember, now blazed into a bonfire. But as the storm of battle reached its crescendo, a shadow darker than the night itself emerged from their own ranks. Lord Valerius, the traitor whose serpent's smile had damned them before, had been fighting alongside them, his betrayal hidden beneath a mask of loyalty. Seeing his chance as Seraphina focused her energy on a particularly large ward, he moved with deadly precision. A dagger's gleam caught the torchlight. Kieran saw it from across the courtyard, his alpha senses screaming a warning. "Seraphina," he roared, but he was too far, tangled with 3 of the enemy's largest berserkers. Pain, searing and absolute, tore through Seraphina's body as Valerius's poisoned silver blade plunged deep into her side. Her song shattered. The shimmering wards flickered and died. The world dimmed at the edges of her vision as she staggered, her hand flying to the wound, her fingers coming away slick with her own blood. Darkness threatened to consume her. Yet, with a will forged in the depths of sorrow and love, she raised her head and met Kieran's horrified gaze. She poured every last ounce of her life force, every memory of her mother's love, every dream of a future with him, into one final, desperate melody. The song that erupted from her was not one of shielding, but of unmaking. It was a pure, resonant blast of moonblood magic that targeted not the enemy, but the ancient curse that had bound Kieran's lineage for centuries. She felt it snap, a psychic chain shattering with a force that echoed through the souls of everyone present. Kieran cried out her name, a sound of pure agony, and with a final, devastating surge, he broke free from his opponents. He carved a path through the battle, a white-furred god of vengeance, reaching her just as her legs gave out. His strong arms caught her falling form, pulling her close to his massive lupine body. In that moment, as she lay dying in his arms, the bond between them sealed. It was not a choice, but a supernova of fated magic. A blinding golden light erupted from their point of contact, flooding the hall and washing over the battlefield. Their souls fused in a union older than time, a claim that echoed through stone and spirit. She felt his entire being pour into her, his memories, his pain, his fierce, unwavering love. She was his, and he was hers, utterly. The pack, witnessing this rebirth amidst the carnage, fell to their knees in awe. The raw power of the union, amplified by Seraphina's sacrifice, was a wave of pure magic that sent the remaining enemies reeling back in terror, their dark enchantments broken. The storm of battle passed, leaving a dawn bathed in the light of newfound hope. Seraphina's eyes fluttered open. The wound in her side still burned, but through the new, unbreakable bond, she could feel Kieran's own life force pouring into her, healing her, anchoring her to the world of the living. He shifted back to his human form, cradling her with a tenderness that defied the chaos around them. They stood side by side, their futures finally entwined as protector and soul-bound mate. The ancient curse, once a yoke of despair, was shattered by love, sacrifice, and the undying power of the moon's song. The night's battle would be sung for generations, an eternal testament to a love forged in fire and melody. Chapter 7. Bonds forged in moonlight. The dawn that crept slowly over the Blackwood fortress was fragile and pale, scattering tendrils of mist across a land scarred and consecrated by battle. In the great hall, the acrid scent of smoke had been scrubbed away, replaced by the clean, sharp smell of healing herbs and pine. The storm had passed. In its wake, it left wounds, grief, and a profound, unbreakable silence that felt heavier than any war cry. Seraphina awoke in the royal chambers, the soft furs of the bed a world away from the cold floor of her old hut. The first thing she felt, before even opening her eyes, was him. The bond, now fully sealed in the crucible of battle and sacrifice, was a living entity between them, a constant, humming current of warmth and power in her soul. It was no longer a fragile thread, but a vibrant golden chain connecting her to Kieran. She could feel his presence across the room, a steady anchor in the turbulent sea of her own recovery. She felt his exhaustion, his bone-deep grief for the warriors they had lost, and radiating beneath it all, a fierce protective love for her that was as vast and overwhelming as the night sky. "You're awake?" he murmured. His voice was rough with sleeplessness, but it was the gentlest sound she had ever heard. He was sitting in a chair by the hearth, watching her, but he crossed the room in a few silent strides the moment she stirred. "I told you I wouldn't leave you," she whispered, her voice still weak but clear. A sound that was half a sob, half a laugh escaped his lips. He knelt by the bed, taking her hand in his. His touch was no longer hesitant or haunted. It was firm, certain, a claim and a promise all in one. "I ordered you into the wilderness. I cast you out. After everything, you made the choice of a king to save your people," she corrected, her fingers lacing with his. The simple touch sent a wave of his strength into her, chasing away the last shadows of her pain. "But I made the choice of a mate. I came back for my family." His thumb stroked the back of her hand, and in the depths of his silver eyes, she saw the last of the curse's ancient darkness finally recede, washed away forever by the luminous flood of their union. 3 days later, when Seraphina was strong enough to walk, the elders convened an official council. As she entered the great hall on Kieran's arm, a hush fell. The pack parted for them, their gazes a mixture of awe, reverence, and gratitude. She was no longer the broken Omega. She was the hero of the battle, their savior, their Luna. Mother Aisling stood before the Alpha's throne, her ancient eyes gleaming with a wisdom that seemed to stretch back to the dawn of their kind. "The curse is broken," she intoned, her voice ringing with sacred authority. "The sacrifice of the Moonblood has purified the Blackwood line, but the magic that shattered the chains is new, raw, and untamed. It must be anchored. The formal claiming ceremony must be performed to present our union to the moon and solidify the dawn of this new era. Kieran looked at Seraphina, his eyes asking a question his words did not. The ceremony was a rite steeped in magic and meaning, far more profound than a simple wedding. It was a binding of souls, a declaration of shared destiny and mutual sovereignty, an act that would formally name her as his equal in leadership. "It would be my honor," Seraphina said, her voice steady, leaving no room for doubt. The ritual took place that night, in the heart of the ancient grove where the moonlight fell in silvery pools upon the fresh snow. The entire pack gathered in a silent, respectful circle, their faces illuminated by soft candlelight, their breath misting in the cold, clean air. Seraphina stood before Kieran, dressed not in borrowed finery, but in ceremonial white furs that had been stitched with silver thread by the pack's den mothers, a gift for their new Luna. The elders began their low, resonant chant, the ancient words weaving blessings meant to bind soul to soul for all eternity. Mother Iceling stepped forward, anointing their foreheads with oils distilled from rare, moonlit herbs. The scent of pine, earth, and something intangible, hope, newly born, filled the sacred space. They turned to face each other, hands clasped, and spoke their vows into the profound silence. "I, Kieran of the Blackwood, who was lost to a cursed legacy," he began, his voice ringing with a power and devotion that made her heart soar. "Accept you, Seraphina of the Moonblood, as the heart of my soul and the fire of my pack. Before the moon and our people, I claim you as my mate, my equal, my Luna. My strength is your shield, and my life is your own, from this night until the stars fall from the sky." Tears streamed down Seraphina's face as she spoke her own vow, her voice clear and resonant with the magic of her ancestors. "I, Seraphina of the Moonblood, who was broken by silence, accept you, Kieran of the Blackwood, as the anchor of my spirit and the protector of my heart. Before the moon and our people, I claim you as my mate, my equal, my alpha. My song is your strength, and my life is your own, now and forever." As the last word faded, he lowered his head, his teeth gently grazing the spot on her neck where their bond had first been sealed in blood and fury. This time, there was no pain, only a wave of warmth and power that solidified their connection, weaving an unbreakable chain of love and destiny. She reciprocated, marking him as hers, and a visible aura of silver and gold light enveloped them, so bright it made the pack gasp in awe. A tangible blessing washed over the gathered wolves, soothing their grief and renewing their hope. In the days that followed, a new harmony settled over the community. Kieran's raw strength was now tempered by Seraphina's compassionate empathy. Their joint rulings favored balance and redemption. Old feuds were quietly mended under their guidance. Together, they began the tireless work of rebuilding the once fractured alliances among neighboring packs, their shared vision of a united, peaceful future inspiring cooperation rather than conquest. The voices of the moon singers, through Seraphina and the young healers she began to teach, echoed once more in the forests, a promise of prosperity and peace carried on the wind. Their nights were filled with whispered conversations in the sanctuary of their chambers, their bodies and souls finally at peace in each other's arms. They spoke of the future, of rebuilding, of a world where their children would inherit not the scars of their lineage, but its strength. They were a king and queen, an alpha and a Luna, but in these quiet moments, they were simply Kieran and Seraphina, two halves of a soul made whole. Her journey from shunned exile to honored queen was a testament to the indomitable spirit of love. Their story, born of shadow and song, would forever be etched into the chronicles of their world, a saga of redemption and the unbreakable bonds forged in moonlight. Chapter 8. Dawn of a New Moon. 1 year later, the first light of dawn spilled across the Blackwood fortress, casting long golden fingers over a land reborn. The harsh, biting winds of the previous winter were now a distant memory, replaced by the gentle warmth of a new season that promised renewal and life. After the trials that had been etched into the very bones of the pack, a hard-won, fragile peace had finally taken hold. Seraphina stood on the highest balcony of the royal chambers, her breath a soft mist in the cool morning air. A heavy cloak of soft white fur was wrapped around her. But it was not the cold she was shielding herself from. Her hands rested protectively on the swell of her belly, where the next generation of their lineage grew strong. Her gaze swept over the vast stretch of the pack's lands. The forests, once places of shadow and exile, now seemed to breathe with a vibrant new energy. "He's awake early this morning," a deep voice murmured from behind her. Kieran's arms wrapped around her, his hands coming to rest over hers on her rounded stomach. He pressed a gentle kiss to her temple, and through their bond, she felt a wave of his profound love and contentment wash over her. It was a feeling she now knew as well as her own heartbeat. "He has his father's restless spirit," she replied, a soft smile touching her lips as she felt a tiny, insistent kick from within. "He is eager to greet the new day." "He is the new day," Kieran said, his voice thick with an emotion that still felt new to him, even after all this time. "The first of our line to be born free of the curse. Because of you." They had forged a path through darkness and despair to the light of this new dawn. The legacy of the Moonbloods was no longer one of silence and loss, but a vibrant thread woven into the very tapestry of their world. Below them, the pack bustled with a renewed purpose that swelled Seraphina's heart. Elders shared stories with the young pups, their voices a chorus of wisdom and hope. In the main training ground, a new generation of warriors trained in the arts of both war and song, their laughter mingling with the rustling leaves. Later that morning, they walked through the heart of the fortress, no longer a place of harsh judgment, but a true home. The changes were everywhere. Old feuds had been quietly mended, the pack's laws rewritten to favor balance and redemption over retribution. As they passed through the courtyard, a young pup, no older than 5, tripped and scraped his knee. Before his mother could reach him, Seraphina knelt, humming a soft, ancient melody. A faint silver light glowed from her palm as she hovered it over the wound, which sealed itself without a scar. The pup stared in wide-eyed wonder before giggling and running back to his friends. "Your lessons are progressing well," Kieran noted, his eyes shining with pride. "The song was never gone from our people," she said, taking his offered hand. They just needed someone to remind them how to listen. Their partnership had become the cornerstone of this fragile new order. They were not simply rulers, but soulmates entwined in a dance as timeless as the moon and stars. They had rekindled ancient alliances and forged new ones, weaving a network of strength and solidarity that promised hope for generations to come. Their story was whispered around campfires in distant territories. They had become living legends, but even legends had to face the mundane realities of leadership. In the council chamber, their beta delivered the morning report. "The Silvercrest Pack has formally accepted the treaty," he announced. "Their alpha sends his regards and an invitation to the summer solstice. This was a major victory, uniting them with a powerful northern clan. However," the beta continued, his expression growing grim, "our scouts report movements in the eastern territories. The last remnants of the Crimson Fang clan are gathering, whispering of vengeance. They have not forgotten their defeat." Kieran's jaw tightened, but his voice was calm, steady. "Double the patrols on the eastern ridges. Send a message to the Silvercrest Alpha. Our first act of alliance will be a joint defense. We will show them that the Blackwood Pack is no longer isolated." His command was tempered by a wisdom earned in battle, a careful balance between demonstrating strength and seeking peace. He looked to Seraphina, a silent question in his eyes. "I will teach a new song of warding to the border patrols," she added, her voice resonating with quiet authority. "One that will alert us the moment any with malice in their hearts try to cross into our lands." The council nodded, their confidence in their new leaders absolute. The shadows of yesterday had not vanished entirely, but they no longer held any terror. They were simply challenges to be met, together. That night, as the moon rose high and full, casting its silver glow over the peaceful valley, Seraphina and Kieran stood on the balcony once more, wrapped in the quiet intimacy that followed a long day. "Do you ever miss the silence?" he asked, his fingers gently tracing the glowing silver markings of her lineage on her arm. "I was never silent," she replied, leaning her head against his chest. "I was just unheard. There's a difference." She looked up at him, her heart swelling with a love so fierce it felt like another form of magic. My journey from that hut in the woods to this balcony was long. I wouldn't change a moment of it, because it led me to you. It led me to this. She placed his hand back on her stomach, where their son kicked in response. He pulled her closer, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was deep and full of promises for the future they were building. They spoke of their children with hope, imagining a world where they would grow up free and strong, blessed with the gifts of their ancestors, unburdened by ancient curses. Theirs was a love that transcended pain and darkness, a luminous thread in the fabric of fate. The tale of Seraphina and Kieran, the song weaver and the king, had reached its crescendo, but their melody, the endless song of hope, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds forged beneath the eternal moon, would echo through time itself, a promise that even after the coldest winter, a new dawn will always rise. If tonight's story moved you, countless adventures of love, redemption, and bonds await. Subscribe and ring the bell to never miss a new chapter. Thank you for walking this path with us under the moon's gaze.